Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast with your host, Ryan Weimer. Today, I have Marck De Lautour with me. Mark, how are you?
I'm good, mate.
So Mark is our first ever Kiwi on the podcast. He might be the best golfer we've ever had, just maybe. I'm not really sure. Just kidding. Mark, when we have played, has kicked my ass multiple times. So Mark is an incredible human, guys. I can't wait to get into it with him today about CEO, COO relationship, just his journey in real estate. He is the CEO and founder of SBD Housing Solutions in Kansas City. He has flipped over 2,000 properties since 2002. That's right, 2,000 properties. And now their property management firm manages just over 700 properties for both his turnkey clients and his own portfolio. What did I miss, Mark? What else can we add to that introduction that you want to share with the audience?
Proud father of two. Just dropped my son off at college, and so he's doing his thing as a baseball player in a Division II college. And my daughter is a cheerleader in high school and loving every day. So
amazing. What has that been like as an empty nester now? Well, not quite, but with the first one.
We're almost there. No, we're steering down the pipeline. It's a fair question. It was quite a reflective and introspective time period when we were looking at colleges and selecting where my son was going to go to university. And because that has come full circle from 30 years ago when I was doing the exact same thing. I graduated 30 years ago from high school and took the big leap, deciding to come over to America to go to university, which none of my friends did. So, I'm happy for him and he's chasing his dream and I'm really proud of him. But yeah, there is that time period that you kind of think, man, it's been 30 years and now here I am. So
yeah, I gotta know what kind of person decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to a completely foreign country where I probably have no friends. I probably have no family. And I'm just going to go for it. And I'm 17, 18 years old. Like, is this something that was kind of ingrained into you from a young age? Was it nature, nurture? What do you think caused that?
I think both, right? So I think nature certainly had a play in it, in that I was the second born child. So I'm a believer in the birth order book and kind of the traditional family aspect. And so I had an older brother, Andrew, that I was always chasing and trying to keep up with and trying to beat on the tennis court. And, so as a middle child, I was always like, I want to be better. I want to be better. I want to be like my older brother. And so it's kind of ingrained in you as a child that you're, trying to be better all the time. And so I kind of had that always, the classic inner middle child syndrome. And then secondarily, I wasn't quite, I was a good tennis player. I wasn't good enough to turn pro, but I didn't want to give it up. I enjoyed it. And I had seen a couple of my friends in New Zealand go over to different universities, or at least I'd heard about it. And so I started going down that path of thinking that sounds cool. So I think it was probably that, along with the fact that, we were blessed to be able to travel a little bit as growing up. So my father, as an airline pilot, would take us on trips, to America and Hawaii and, California, Hawaii, as far as America is concerned, went to Mexico, and some trips around the Pacific and Australia. So, certainly travel was ingrained in us. I wasn't scared of travel as a young kid. I wasn't with someone that felt like I had to stay close to home. So, and when you come from a little country like New Zealand, the world is your oyster, right? So You're kind of thinking, hey, look, we know that there's a lot out there. I think Americans tend to be ingrained with, we're the greatest country in the world, which I believe, but we're the greatest country in the world. And so I've got everything I need here. I don't need to go anywhere else. If I want beaches, I'll go to California or Florida. If I want the mountains, I'll go to Colorado or Utah. And you kind of have everything here, which you do. But I think it would be also a little short-sighted to not realize that there's so much more to the rest of the world. And travel is a great way to, experience some different cultures and mindsets and meet new people. So, yeah, a little bit of both, nature and nurture, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we live in London, right? And I think there's something about travel that just gives you the best worldly perspective and education.
Wayne said it best, mate. He said that travel is the enemy of prejudice. And I think that's very true. If you travel around, meet new people, you become pretty tolerant of different perspectives in life.
Yeah, 100%.
The world needs that right now.
100%. It's hard, though, to leave a place like New Zealand. I got to say, of all the places I've been in the world, New Zealand is number one so far for me. Absolutely love it. It's breathtaking.
Yeah, and all my
So
family's back home, so I just make the commitment to getting back there as much as possible. It's certainly a lovely place to call home, and enjoy getting back there whenever I can. Already got my the next trip I've got lined up with a good friend of yours, Chris Johns, and I, my COO. We're actually got a guy's golf trip. He's such a good friend of mine, and we'll probably get into how that came to be. But we've got a 6-person guys golf trip lined up to take some of my best friends down to New Zealand and play the courses down there. So I'm really excited for that in March of 25.
that'll be amazing. Awesome, awesome stuff. Okay. Take me through a little bit like your journey. I know you started in real estate in 2002. What would you say is your most beautiful failure to date?
I think my most beautiful failure would probably be my business partnership that was a really bitter business divorce. So my journey was, and I flipped one home in 2002 on my own and was kind of young and dumb enough to think, oh man, I don't need to go work for someone else. I'm just going to keep doing this. And so I'd done 4 or 5, and I'd found a niche buying houses on the courthouse steps, but you needed capital to really scale that business. And so reached out to a friend who then brought in another friend. And so it was kind of a 3-legged stool where I was the operations and the manager. They were just 2 silent business partners that were putting in the capital, but we did go a third across the board. And then again, probably not the topic of discussion for today's podcast, but ended really badly. They were just kind of took advantage of me, and it was an epic failure of not understanding that when you're a minority owner in a business, you really don't have any control, and so you don't really own much of anything. And that was probably a lesson that I needed to learn at a young age. So it's kind of like, scaled quickly, millionaire by the age of 30, and then lost everything, back to broke, and trying to figure it all out again, and then scaling back up. So it was, I think that was a beautiful failure in that it was an epic failure that really rocked the family in a meaningful way. But it was, I guess, if you want to call it beautiful, in the sense that it got me out on my own. I think that was the path that was laid out for me, was to do things on my own and be able to go, like CG, good example. Like, my business partners may not have approved of me, spending the money to go better myself and better equip our company to go and scale. So I think once I had back to total control, there was a way better place to be. And then obviously, proved out in the long run with the wealth that was built through my real estate holdings, was way better to be doing that just for myself than splitting that 3 ways.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, guys, Mark is one of the leaders at Collective Genius, which I think is hands down the best real estate mastermind in the country. Mark actually gave a talk recently about the CEO-COO relationship, which we'll get into in a minute. But Mark, what I find in the people that I've talked to, and I'm sure you can resonate with this as well with the people that you've talked to, you kind of nonchalantly brushed through that as being an epic failure and losing everything at the age of 30 or just shortly after that, being a millionaire at 30 and then losing everything. Is that a prerequisite for success? I mean, like when you think about the people that have succeeded the most and are the most fulfilled, they had some kind of life-altering event. Why is that?
You don't know where the brakes are. I think you're all accelerator as a 20-year-old kid. Most people that are entrepreneurial like you and I, we're all accelerator. We're thinking like, let's just go crush. And, it's that dog-headed, can-do attitude that propels us to think we could even start our own business. I mean, we're kind of bullheaded in that mindset right off the bat. And so, with no break, it can be extremely risk tolerant. And I think you've got to learn where the limits are. You've got to become a full cycle investor. I was talking to my title company, just the president of the title company just yesterday, and he mentioned that there was a couple of kids that came in and he didn't mention their names, but said, yeah, they'd watched some of your podcasts and they've dropped your name knowing that he knew me or something. And he was saying how just they were so young and reckless. They were flipping their first or maybe it was their third, but a very short number of flips, and they were working on their second or third or something. And they had put hard money down as their loan, but also hard money for the down payment portion for the other loan. So they were like hard money.
Smart.
Layering.
What could go wrong?
Oh yeah, nothing. And they started telling him like, would you want to be a hard money lender to us? It's just, there's no risk. I mean, we've vetted this property out. There's no risk. And so, just that young, immature thought. He just kind of chuckled and he's like, guys, there's always risk, right? There's, termite risk, there's foundation risk, there's title risk, there's inflation risk, there's interest rate risk, there's risk everywhere. There's risk of having your money in a bank. Just ask those savings and loans guys that left their money in a bank, so risk is everywhere. And I think as you age and get a few more of these gray hairs, you understand, just what you need to be wary of. And so, although it's not a prerequisite, it certainly helps. And I think becoming full cycle investor, you just realize that there's no straight line from bottom left to top right on a growth chart. There's very much a climbing a mountain of peaks and valleys and ups and downs. And I think those that last in business are those that can pivot through the challenges and the downturns.
Absolutely. Well said. There's that chart I like to reference often with our team about embracing failure, where you have informed or uninformed optimism when you start out because you're new and you're naive and you're just trying a bunch of stuff and you're seeing what sticks. And then there's this kind of, oh, this is the stack of work in front of me moment, or you have some kind of setback and you get informed pessimism about it. And then you reach this like crisis of meaning point where you're just like, what did I just do? Was it all worth it? Where at, like rediscovering yourself. And then to finally get to that like informed optimism where, okay, I might not know all the risks in front of me, but I know a lot more than I did before. And that better arms you in decision making and strategy moving forward. So fast forwarding recently, we've had this like massive run up in appreciation, record low interest rates during COVID, right? And then all of a sudden in 2022, interest rates doubling in short order. I know in 2021, you were remodeling over 100 homes at a time. You were expanding to 12 markets. How has that changed?
Changed considerably. So we literally made t-shirts for the team called Chasing 90. So we were so hell-bent on getting from 147 houses on the books down to 90 by end of year that on October 30th, we said, hey, we got it. We made t-shirts, and it was our theme for October, November, December. Our Q4 theme was Chasing 90. And we made a big thing of it, announced every morning what our number was. So if we were 147, then 146, then 145, measure what matters. And what mattered to me at the time was just, I didn't know what 2023 was going to bring. So in 2022, we were like, hey, this could just be the rates could continue to go up. I mean, we didn't think they would go from, all the way up to 8-9%. And so when, would they hit double digits? No one knew. So we were kind of, questioning that. So we measured every morning what mattered, and that number mattered to us. So we were calling it out every morning on a morning huddle and chasing it down aggressively. We are no longer in 12 markets. We're in 3, looking at our 4th. And we now comfortably have a very comfortable and manageable amount of debt. We went from about 16 million in debt now down to about 2 million, flexing up to about 4 million at any given time. We're wholesaling and wholetailing now rather than forcing ourselves to fix and flip everything. But remember, when you're someone reliant on realtor and wholesalers bringing you deal flow, Ryan, that's one of the biggest challenges is you don't have the ability to wholesale. So direct to seller, we really had to expand our direct to seller operation. And that's where our main focus was. And that's what's been kind of our pain point, learning curve, cutting your teeth, whatever you want to call it. That's where we've really been pouring our energy into the last 12 to 24 months, is becoming, best in class at direct to seller. And that's what we're chasing, because once you control your lead flow and can bring on deal flow consistently, then you have the option of flexing too. Do I want to flip this month or not? And that's where we needed to get to. So 147 assets on the books was not a fun place to be. And I had wise counsel all around me in the form of my CFO at the time and my COO and some other people that I put a lot of trust in, Jason Medley being one of them. We all talked about what I should be doing and made the tough decision to just kind of, just get rid of all assets and reset. So a lot of negative earnings, but positive cash flow. So it was a tough time, but we pivot through it and now we're, stronger and better because of it.
Yeah, I think you find out a lot about yourself in these times of adversity, right? And making these really hard decisions, because I'm sure a decision like that comes with potentially layoffs, definitely reallocation of spending, definitely reallocation of how you're spending your time. This nice, cushy inflationary period where cash is aplenty, right, during COVID, and then like this reset of, oh crap, we really got to batten down the hatches. What was that an easy process for you to like, hey, I've been through the 08, 09 crash before, like I know what to do here, and like was it an easy decision, or did it take you kind of multiple months of mulling this over and trying to come to the right decision point?
At Offer Now Idaho, we're looking to hire A players to run our organization and help us grow our business.
Absolutely. And it's not going to be easy, but what in life is? You can choose your hard, you can choose to be poor, you can choose to be rich. They're both hard. Would you rather work for a company that has your best interests in mind and wants to push you to be the best version of yourself, where you actually can give back to the community and have a tangible impact in people's lives? You know, our motto is providing freedom to our team members, our community, and ourselves through real estate.
The whole reason Offer Now Idaho was created, I was a mechanical engineer, and I was just a cog in the wheel. At the end of the day, I was just a number. I got laid off once. I got passed up for a promotion multiple times, even though I was already doing half of the role plus my own. I wanted to be able to control my own destiny and impact others around me without having the handcuffs of a corporation and deal with corporate politics. Getting passed up for that promotion, already doing the work, I remember just feeling, am I really going to do this for the next 30 years of my life? I need to start taking control now. I need to go start something. I need to go build something that will attract other like-minded people that are seeking that. The ability to work remote, right? That want to be able to have an unlimited ceiling on what they can earn. And the results that they get have a direct impact on what they get compensated. You can't get that in a corporate job. Right now, we have a $3,000 referral program. If you know somebody that's looking for a new role, we will pay you $3,000 once that person is hired by us and they hit their 90-day mark. So if you know of anybody that's looking for a new job or looking to change their life, shoot me a DM at RealRyanWeimer on Instagram.
Let's get it.
What I learned was that I kind of thrive under pressure. And I think not only have I surrounded myself with a lot of really quality people that can advise me if I do have questions, but I also feel like because I've gone through several iterations, you know, whether it be the the massive financial crisis in 2008 and 9, whether it be, you know, COVID and renters not wanting to pay their rent, or whether it be this massive interest rate hike, there's been several cycles that we've had to pivot through. And that's honestly where I think, you know, I felt closest to being a CEO in our organization is when, you know, disaster strikes and, you know, it's all hands on deck and giving clear direction. And I think I'm a calming influence to the org. And although there were a couple that we did have to lay off, it was, you know, we committed through that time period to maintaining, you know, about 95% of our staff. And so we really didn't lay off that many people. And, you know, we were able to get through those tough times and keep everyone on board.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to the thriving under pressure. I've seen Mark win a wager from Doug Hopkins on hole 18 on a 10-foot putt for like 20 grand. So I could definitely attest to that. I think that's where you earn your stripes as a CEO, right? And that's when talking about this concept of leadership at Collective Genius and like measuring that and what is that, I think that really speaks volume to those people listening that maybe aren't that at that step yet, or maybe they are, of like this maybe immeasurable concept of leadership. That's really when you need it most. How instrumental do you think meeting like a COO has been in your journey? And maybe talk a little bit about life before meeting Chris or bringing Chris on, and then life after.
Yeah, so it was very impactful for me in that I've always wanted to build a business that had some, you know, depth and longevity to it. It was never just about, you know, me expending as much energy as possible and making as much money as possible. So I did that for a period, you know, but it took a toll on me and took a toll on, you know, my family to a certain degree, you know, where you have to give up, you know, when you're the guy that is not only doing the research on the foreclosure properties, but driving by them and then doing a title search late at night and to get to a 9 a.m. auction the next morning. There are times when you're like, hey, I got to go do what I got to do. And there's sacrifices in any business So I wanted to try and build. The challenge for me has been, how do I build a self-sustaining business, one that can run without me? I've seen others people do it, and that was always been the challenge for me. So I started going down that path and realized pretty quickly that in now analyzing my own strengths and weaknesses, one of the greatest weaknesses that I had was my own personality trait, and I'm a captain on the PI index, is kind of navigating choppy waters, which is why I thrive in those environments, when there's trouble and people that are not really, when there's tough decisions to be made. I'm a problem solver who likes, change and innovation, right? Well, but controlling the big picture. What I really needed was an integrator to come in that would be able to overlay some kind of process of accountability. I'm not very good at holding people accountable. I tend to help detail what needs to be done and then leave the room expecting them to do it, and then check in with them later. And, later, maybe a month later, depending on how busy everybody is. So that's not Chris. And so Chris is highly detailed, operationally sound. And so recognizing my own flaws, then trying to find someone that had strengths where I had weaknesses, I think has been the recipe for success.
Yeah. How hard was it to convince him to come over? I mean, is this something you were kind of plugging away with him for multiple months, multiple years, or was it just kind of a, hey, would this make sense type of random moment?
So we had been friends for about 8 or 9 years when, we're struggling with, going direct to seller. There were like accountability of salespeople. I'd always been just throw your hand up at an auction and buy a house, and the auctions were going away. So we were trying to try this direct to seller thing. Needed someone to kind of hold my guys accountable. And he was a sales manager. And so I said, hey, look, I've seen you, I've listened to you on some calls. I know what you do. Would you be able to just kind of, moonlight and give my guys some level of accountability? And so he came in, and immediately I'm like, wow, he's getting really granular. This is crazy how much detail he puts into his time and effort on these things. And so I saw the genius right from the get-go. But the challenge with that also is that those that are not used to it reject it. And so the people that I had hired were not ready, willing, or able to be held that accountable. They preferred to have a very loosey-goosey management style like I have,
of course,
to be running them. So he ran them off, and then I'm like, okay, well, not literally, but after a time period, it was clear that they were not the ones for the role. And that's when I was at my lowest point. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not, because I had never honestly thought of bringing him on full time. I was just wanting to hire him as a consultant. And then it was a CG that I had my low point when Jason Medley now famously said, what, are you having a no hair gel day? What's going on here? But that was kind of me at my low point. And I realized that night that I needed help, and that he would be someone that could deliver that help. And he had actually been at CG just coming down to kind of learn like a little bit about what I do. And so he saw and got a glimpse of, not just my company, but, we talked a lot about where I was at. I think a tear or two was shed at the dinner table when I was just kind of like saying, dude, I can't go on like this. It was really bad. Well, he actually left the next day, jumped on a plane. I had my thinking day to kind of reset and get ready to come back to the team, put my armor on and go back into battle. And he wrote me an email that night of the top 10 reasons why he should come on, because he wanted to help his friend. So it was actually mutually, like, I knew I needed him, but I was kind of scared to hire a friend. He actually wrote an email saying, here's the top 10 reasons why I need to come on board with you, and let's see if we can make this work. And so he was able to kind of accept less than what he had been making corporately to be able to bet on the upside. And then I was able to kind of overcome my fear, of building this thing back up. And so we just got some clarity of vision, clarity of thought, how we could work together, and we took the plunge.
Yeah. What an incredible character trait to see and witness in a COO. I think, I'm sure at that moment, it was when you needed it most. And to see something like that, I'm sure it was just pretty scary feeling, but also a sense of relief as well. Having been through some...
There are pros and cons of hiring a friend, but if you have a true friend, he has always said, like, if it's in the best interest for, he always says, you and Sarah Beth, who's my wife. So if he says, if it's in the best interest of you and Sarah Beth for me to leave the org, I'll leave the org. If it's, if I'm going to do everything I can, I'll always put you and your wife at the forethought of every decision I make in the company. And that's the way he's always done everything. tough decisions, easy decisions. He's always doing what's in the best interest of our team and me as the owner of the company.
That's pretty incredible. I think all of us definitely aspire to have a COO like that. And for those people listening that may not have a COO yet or are looking for one, I did want to discuss this concept of the CEO and COO is not a partnership. And having been through some failed partnerships yourself, I see a lot of people that partner up maybe out of convenience, more so than a strength meeting a strength. What would you tell somebody that's on the cusp of like, hey, I'm not sure if I should just partner with somebody or if I should really just go and hire my COO? What advice would you give there?
Yeah, they actually do it out of fear, I would say.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the guts to just do it on their own. And I see it even broken down like, I help people invest in real estate as a turnkey operator. So occasionally I'll have a couple of guys say, hey, I want to sit down and meet. And, we're thinking of investing and we're going to go into business together. And I sit down with them and very clearly say, look, the only ship that never sails is a partnership. And, it's a line I stole from Dave Ramsey back in the day. But there's a lot of truth to that. And I tell them right up front, look, the only reason that you're both here is because like you don't need each other's capital. You're wealthy, he's wealthy. You could both invest individually. Would highly encourage you to go on your own journeys. Happy to network and mastermind and talk and discuss, but don't be reliant, because the problem is that you're going to do some due diligence, but not as much as if it was just your money. And you're going to do some due diligence, but then you'll skip this one because you'll think that he's doing it. And there's this byproduct of laziness and apathy that comes from thinking someone else is on board with you. And so that's when you're investing. Now, the same could be applied to a business partnership where, rather than just one guy taking the reins and saying, hey, I'm owning this and I'm going to run with it, they just kind of get together. And there's always complications. One guy has more money than the other. One's doing more work than the other. It's really hard to be 50-50 because who makes the final decision? And they end up parting ways down the road. So yeah, look, I think there's nothing wrong with structuring it, because the one, Dave says never partner with somebody and give up equity, but he also says be very generous with your rev share. Well, I'll tell you that the way our company has ebbed and flowed, it's been way more in Chris's benefit to be on a rev share agreement than an equity agreement, because, if you're having losses, he doesn't share in any losses, and, he paid out regardless of, if we have a bad quarter or whatever. So, there are pros and cons to the equity side of the equation. And I think it's better to just have a employer-employee relationship. But again, then there's the flip side of that is once you do get that integrator coming into your company, and by the way, I don't know how leveled up your audience is, but if they're listening and thinking they need to hire a COO, I'd say be very, very, very careful with that terminology, because it comes at a very hefty price tag. Just remember, It's an integrator. Visionary and integrator are the two roles. The whole CEO, COO, there's been so much title inflation lately that we got to be careful of that. But back to, if you hire an integrator for your company and you bring them in, I think it's, valid for them to have the ability to override the CEO or the owner of the company in any business decisions once they get to the point where they're running the company. And that's to the point where Chris is at now, where, I will give him, 100 new ideas every year, and he might only implement maybe 5 of those. And the others he'll say, no, not right now. And he has the right to do so as the integrator of the business.
Yeah. I love that you touched on the topic of title inflation, because when you and Chris were given that presentation a while back at the last event, I was just thinking, yep, I've done that more times than I'd like to admit. I think a lot of it's just out of ignorance that we can't just throw around these big juicy titles, because
And
some
ego.
people,
Ignorance and ego.
exactly, because some people view it as a level of entitlement to some degree, right? Can you talk to me about maybe some other examples of title inflation and some negative impacts that you've seen across your org or other people's orgs?
Yeah, very much so. So as an example, like you've got mid-level management, right? So, you've got you've got assistants, and then operational. I'll kind of use ops as an example because it's easiest. But you've got like an executive assistant. Then you could go to operations specialist, operations manager, director of operations, and then COO. So there's like levels of someone that can come in. And the problem is, if you give, let's say that you've got a problem with overseeing, disposition and acquisitions, and you need an operations specialist to come in and just really have a level of accountability through the organization. So Case in point, we had on the acquisition and disposition side, so call it out like a fix and flip company, we had where Chris was just burdened with, he needed someone to come in and just help out from an ops perspective, overlay all the things that and follow up on all the things that he was implementing into the business, because he's pulled in many different directions as the COO of our company. So on the fix and flip business, we hired an operations specialist. So his role, Robbie, was to come in and make sure that everything that Chris was implementing in these meetings was actually getting done. We had a price tag associated with that, but it wasn't director level. It wasn't even managerial level. It was like an ops specialist level. So, we set the bar appropriately. So we always give a range of comp that would be, on a job description, so that you can obviously attract top talent. But that is an example of where if you had to say like operations manager, well, they'll come in at a comp package that you're happy with and they're happy with, and then one day they'll wake up saying, "Man, I'm so busy. Let me see what other operations managers are making." And then they start comparing themselves to corporate America, where an operations manager might be making $30,000 more than what they're making, and they're like, "Hey, this isn't fair. Look at what their operations managers are making." And it's the same thing with like a director of property management. So in a property management company, we hired a director of property management. Really, they were a property manager, but we had already called the other people property managers. So the next level up is director. So you're kind of hiring someone at that lofty title, and you got to pay them a lofty comp package to get them and entice them to come on. And, if they're not truly delivering the value that title would normally deliver, I think it's a recipe for failure, both on the expectations they have for their work associated with what their comp package is, as well as the level of accountability and managerial leadership that they're going to take on. Because there is the biggest gap in our organization. In fact, in any organization, you will rise and fall to the level of the leadership in the organization. And as you can groom leaders in your organization, your company will rise. If you're the only leader in your organization making decisions and the only one thinking and strategically planning, then you're doomed for failure, and you're doomed for, well, at least, you're doomed for not scaling and growing with your existing clientele, because they will never level up. So once you realize that your role as a leader is to groom other leaders and train other leaders, is when you'll start to find great traction.
Yeah, man, I can share personally the times that we've given too big of a title to somebody. It's not something that you can reverse, right? I mean, if you anybody will view that as a demotion, and so you risk turnover there. Plus, then there's no growth that you can sell them on within the company, because they think that they've already achieved a certain level, right? And so then it might feel really good in the moment bringing on that person as a hire, but then in the months and years that follow, they're going to look around and be like, "What was all this growth I was sold on? I already have the title."
That's right. And I think it's actually the ego of the owner more so than anything, that you want to have a director of property management, or you want to have a sales manager, but because it would solve a lot of your problems. And other people that you're referencing, you're like, "Oh, do you have a sales manager?" No. "Oh man, you got to have a sales manager." But what they haven't seen is that sales manager was groomed in their organization for 5 years and finally took that title down the road. You just want to go hire someone immediately that don't know your culture or anything about the organization. So it's just more complicated than saying, "What do I need?" and hit the button. So it's been a learning curve, but I think we're finally there. And we're very, very cautious with titles and how they are used, because they absolutely do matter. And once you figure that out, if you're too far down the road, turnover is inevitable. You will change titles on people, and it will become a sore point for those that are impacted.
Yeah. Well said. And I'll give you a shameless plug here too, Mark, where I've really admired you most is definitely on business strategy and being able to articulate it eloquently. I'm curious, scaling, not scaling, profitability, reinvestment. I know recently at one point you were like, "Let's go to 12 markets," like we talked about before. Now that's scaled back to 3, a potential 4th. Talk to me about like the right time to scale and the wrong time to scale, because I think this is a current struggle that I have, is like balancing this element of profitability and then reinvesting back into the business, and really trying to gauge how many chips should I take off the table.
Yeah, wow. There's so much to unpack in that statement there, Ryan. I think if you were to gauge it today and do some self-reflection and have some thinking time, I would be thinking through, how many employees do I have and what's their capacity? length of time in business and the maturity of the business. Have you tried expanding to one market before, or one different, not even a market, but even like, have you tried this new path or a new path before? And what did that look like? Then there's the cash flow, or your revenue stance. Where are you currently placed with your cash flow, and how stable is it? Is there any time or flex in that? Is there a chance that could get squashed? As an example, when we had interest rates go from 3% for our investor base, where we're selling to investors that were buying remodeled turnkey product from us, and they were saying more, and we're like, oh, right. Man, we have so much demand. And my idiot brain did not think that interest rates going up a little bit, I thought like, hey, I can still sell property at that price. But when they tripled and went from 4% all the way up to like 9 and 10%, they're getting quoted for investment property. Wow. All of a sudden that was, a massive hurdle to overcome. And suddenly our demand that I thought was, ever present, suddenly was waning to the point of almost frailty. And so you've got to look at how financially stable you are. And then lastly, it's a mindset thing. Are you ready as a leader? Is your team ready to scale? Are you emotionally and mentally at a state of mind that you can grow? And then, unfortunately, the turtle wins the race is what I've learned. You want to go fast and you want to move really quickly into different markets and take on, but just be respectful that when let's say that you're in one market and you want to expand into another one, just remember that there's someone that's been there for 30 years that's doing what you do, that knows the market better than you do, and is going to be not taking lightly to the fact that you're coming in competing with them, and will likely do everything they can to make sure that you fail. So we had that instance up in the Quad Cities where there were some guys that just sold us some bad assets knowingly, trying to torpedo us, and we didn't have the right systems in place to monitor and check that. So that kind of hurt us. And then we had again, you rise and fall to the level of your leadership. We had a guy that had an overinflated title of COO for a big company up there, and was not even managerial worthy. He was just a layman. And so we thought, man, this guy's leaving this company, which we knew was bad. And he's the COO, and he was operating that whole company. He'll be able to come in here at a demoted title and do really well. But even as an acquisitions manager, he failed miserably. So, you always think you have all the answers and you can kind of game plan for it. But humble pie and checking your ego when you're looking to make some big moves and bouncing ideas off other people. Multiple heads make wise decisions. And so just checking your decisions before you go rushing into things, which is why having a super hard charging, Captain Maverick style entrepreneurial visionary to be balanced by a very conservative, pessimistic, operationally sound accountability king integrator is essential to the growth of an organization. I think unless you have someone that kind of checks and balances you shouldn't be doing it. You should be scaling the depth and breadth of your organization, and then trying to find someone that will come in and take over some of your operational excellence so that you can then move on to thinking bigger things.
Absolutely agree. And as hardcore visionaries, I think there's just this default thing of like scaling is sexy, right? And it's this matter of conquest and how far can we go and how much can we conquer. And I kind of want to flip that on its head with you and ask maybe a simplified version of what would even be a reason to take on a second market, let alone a third or fourth? Like, what are things that you would look for if, let's say, you're just in one market, you've been focusing into that up to that point? What would even be the reason to take on a second?
Yeah, to me, it comes down to helping more people. And that comes down to not just the sellers, the homeowners that we serve, but the investors that we're bringing deal flow to, the markets that we're elevating. I mean, it's living into your core being. Our two things are to provide high quality passive investing for real estate investors and transform communities. So it's living into your core values. If scaling lives into your core values and your purpose for being, then go do it. But if you're just doing it for ego, then you've got to think twice. We can help more people. We can drive greater revenue to the company, which can afford us to, spend more on our employees, our team members, of what their dreams and visions are for down the road. So, and then help more homeowners in distress, help more investors that are wanting to deploy capital into quality real estate investments, help other investors that are looking to manage their assets, and we can manage those assets for them. I think all down the line, it's just all about living into your purpose. And for us, it's those two things.
Yeah. When you guys were looking to take on a second market, was there anything that you were specifically measuring where you were like, okay, now it's time? I know obviously probably you were getting demand requests from a lot of your turnkey buyers. Were there any other business metrics that you were seeing, maybe diminishing returns in one area, or maybe it was even on a macro level? Hey, we see a lot of population growth, job growth, more so in this other area than what we have here.
I think for us, we were trying to find a way to bring more deals because we thought we had unlimited demand for our turnkey product, and we had finite demand in our Kansas City marketplace where we were getting deal flow. So for us, we kind of were under the false narrative that, we had to go to another market to provide that same deal flow. What we probably should have done is weaned our demand into, a tighter group of people that would go deeper with us and then keep buying through the downturn, educate them of what was coming through the pipeline, knowing interest rates would go up, and work with them deeper, longer, rather than skinning out relationships and just selling to as many people as we could. So that was probably one lesson. But yeah, as far as the demos, obviously we probably got lost in that, to be honest with you. I think one thing that I would do differently is I think we spent too much time picking the perfect market, looking at the demographics, looking at the competition, how many PPC clicks were they getting for, buy my house now, how many PPL leads were there, like doing all the analysis on the markets. And we had about 20 different markets in the Midwest that we were looking at going into. And then we found the perfect one, so it's like, boom. And you kind of take your eye off of the why and figure out the how and where. And I think we should have been spending more time on the why and, and are we really living into our core purpose? So look, fortunate that we were able to get through that, and fortunate that I'm so conservative by nature that, I did have the one thing that I'd done well is kind of stock my coffers to make sure that I wasn't going to go belly up. So I think the time was right for us and the financial wherewithal to withstand a downturn was there. But I think if we had have looked a little closer, there's probably still a little ego rearing its ugly head at the time, thinking we wanted to be in multiple markets. I mean, this, sign right back here, 1-800-SELL-NOW, was another ego check where we were looking at using that brand to go, not nationwide, but like throughout the Midwest. We wanted to have like this, this big name. And so we were looking at investing into that. Finally, at the end, we decided we went against that because of the timing didn't work out. But it's all one of those ego plays, I think, that you've got to check yourself at the door and say, look, why am I doing this? Does it really fulfill our mission and vision as a company, or are we just doing it to just be bigger and better?
Yeah. And at that time, I know you mentioned you guys have really built out the direct-to-seller part of the business more. What percentage back in 2021 was turnkey flips wholesaling for you guys versus what it is now?
Well, here's some crazy stats for you. So in 2017, we still did 150 deals that year. And I think 125 of them were on the courthouse steps and only 25 off the steps.
Wow.
2018 was our last year. I think we did 100 deals on the steps and didn't do many other deals at that time. Then in 2019, we did 0 on the courthouse steps. We went from like 125 to 100 to 0. And you're trying to that was our primary, and for context, for those listening, we had consistently done at least 100 deals a year buying on the courthouse steps, for the decade prior. So yeah, it was a crazy swing where all of a sudden it's like, hey, you got to figure out how to buy houses without just going and raising your hand at an auction anymore. So that was kind of on the acquisition side. We had this massive shift, and now we're having to spend money, answer a phone, set an appointment, get a contract. Hopefully it doesn't cancel, and then going through and taking it down and rehabbing it. So we did that and started rehabbing everything. So we get this big ball, and then we're like, well, we're not able to, because there's a transition. You don't suddenly start spending all that money and doing it initially. So it's like, well, hey, we have all these wholesalers who want to sell us houses. Let's just buy from the wholesalers. So we went wholesalers and realtors and went that channel, and then finally NPPL. And then we thought, man, now we've got to change our game and flip the script to try and actually do it all ourselves. And that's only when we've found our greatest success, is when we've been able to control and do it ourselves. So on the acquisition side, we've gone from 100% auction to 0% auction. And now we are 100%, 90% direct to seller, and then 10% referral. And then I would say now on the disposition side of things, we were probably fix and flip 40%, turnkey 60%, to now we are 40% flip, but now we're actually incorporating wholesale and wholetail to equal about 25 to 30% of the disposition method of our assets on the back end, and zero turnkey. So literally we've gone from all auction, all selling turnkey to zero at bought at auction and selling zero turnkey, other than our new construction product, which is kind of a different discussion. And so now on our fix and flip company, it's direct to seller 100%. And now we are fix and flipping and, doing some wholesale.
Love that breakdown. How would you say getting some of that quick cash in with wholesales on the balance sheet has had an impact in your business and both you personally?
Personally, no big deal. But the business wise, it has definitely, just cash conversion cycle is meaningful. There's a chart that I like to show in some of my presentations that shows my 16 million in debt, and now we're down to just 4 million. The reason that is significant is, and by the way, there was like a red, yellow, and green of like, there was a significant part of the mountain that was like going to mature in 60 days because the rehabs have been taking so long. So if you look at our time, we blew out to where we had about 11 during COVID, when everything kind of shut down and the painters were, it was really hard to rehab. And we had at one time where we were about ballooned out to like 11 months of our average sales time. So it was just awful. Wow. So now we're back down to around, I think 100 days is our average. And obviously with, wholesales being 0 days, and then wholetails being 30 days, and then our fix and flip being 110, it's just continuing to come down. So cash conversion cycle is something that has been very, very, very meaningful to us. Our banks appreciate it way more. They're not sitting on the loans as much as they were previously, so they can see the health of our organization as we continue to turn product. But you talked about, like you mentioned earlier, about reinvesting, and that's something that I've been mindfully doing. Is the last 3 years has been, very little taken out of the company for me, and all about hiring the best talent I can get to build an engine that can sustain without my direct day-to-day supervision. And that's where we're getting very, very close to now. And that has been meaningful to me more than anything. And again, that's all about timing, because I fully understand that there are, times when you've got to go milk the cow and get as much cash in as possible and try and, stock your war chest. But, there's also seasons when you're like, okay, I'm set over here, no personal debt and got, a lot in savings. So now, you don't need, when's enough. Now you go just pour it back into the organization to build something that's of stature that can stand the test of time and get through these twists and pivots and turns that are coming in the market regardless, and see what we can do. So, we've quadrupled our ad spend, and that's a product of us just pouring more money. That's primarily where I'm putting our money back into the organization, is talent and ad spend. So getting the right people and then spending more money to try and drive our competition out so that we can, dominate the Kansas City market.
Yeah. Two best places to put it. Talking about hiring talent, that comes with a big price tag. How have you, I know a lot of times in us scaling and hiring and growing leaders within our org and scaling out the sales team can feel a little bit like the chicken or the egg. Players demand a higher base salary. And of course, there's ways that you can get creative with that, with rev share and commissions and things like that. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, like, is it always going to feel for somebody starting out like that first person, maybe the 10th person that I hire, but I know they're a true A player. I know they're a little bit probably higher than what I could afford, but I also know that bringing them on is going to be a game changer for the business. And a year from now, things will be, this is necessary for me to accomplish what I want to accomplish. How do you kind of balance that chicken or the egg thing about maybe affording an A player before you're quite ready?
Yeah. So 22 years later, what have I learned in business? And it's almost the opposite of what you led with, where you said, hiring the top talent is expensive. It's literally the opposite, where it's like hiring B and C talent is expensive because you're going to get turnover and lack of productivity. And so It's taken a long, long time to acknowledge that and incorporate that into exactly how we run our business. But Chris had a massive impact on changing my mindset there and committed. He's like, dude, how it's different because corporate, you can just go hire the best talented people and they have massive budgets and they're making millions and billions and billions. And it's like, okay, different game. But the concept is the same, that, the best talent's going to win in the end. And so he's like, look, if we want to win and play the long game, we have to be the best and we have to have the best working for us. And so the commitment to talent was something that he and I both committed to. And when we looked at our organization 6 years ago, it was probably only one or two people that we would enthusiastically rehire and put in that same spot. So we knew it was going to be a slow slog to get through, to get it to where we are today. And indeed, it will always be that way for people. But the commitment has to be unified approach. It has to be unfailing. And once you move down that path, you realize that just bringing on and paying top talent there's no other way to go. So it's painful. But what's more painful is paying someone and having them stay when they're not performing the way and not leading your business down the road and the path that you want to go. And I think we were facing a little bit more of that than we would have cared to admit. And, you just keep leveling up, and someone who used to think was an A player that's still on your team, now you're like, oh man, with all this other talent around, they're actually a B minus, and then they raise their game or vote themselves off the island. A lot of times now, you don't even tell people to leave or fire them. They're just like, I found something different. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you have, because the A talent that's in the building right now, you wouldn't be able to keep up with. And so they start kind of self-voting themselves off. But no, the commitment to talent, if you're going to scale a business, you've talked about scale today, you've talked about growing into multiple markets. So, for those listeners that may be contemplating this, to do it without having A players that are committed to you and you're paying them well, they're going to look for other things if you don't pay your people well, or they can get a better deal elsewhere. And then it's about just culture. I just came off. So Wednesdays at noon, we're recording this on a Wednesday, is my book club day. And so part of the way I re-engage or stay engaged with my employees is by leading book club with them. And we read books like, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace and The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and The Ideal Team Player and those kind of books. And it's just really great to, we had, today was the conclusion of The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And we just kind of took a poll of what were your takeaways from the book, and just the level of insight from our team as to how much culture matters and how we are, how they're so appreciative of the effort that we put into it with, monthly meetups, quarterly cultural events, the daily huddle, the accountability check-ins. Like, our team embraces accountability in a meaningful way. They want to be held accountable. We were laughing about how occasionally at CG, someone will pull me aside and say, hey, I'm struggling with culture. And we're like, well, what do your accountability check-ins look like? How often do you meet with your team? How often do you, get their numbers? And they're like, oh no, I'm not doing those things. I'm like, well, people love to be held accountable. And like, oh, I thought that would scare people off. I'm like, no, it's the exact opposite. Accountability is to be embraced and encouraged. And I think that's something that has really helped our team grow into the people that they are. So.
Yeah. I love that you said that. A players especially love to be held accountable because they have that stack of undeniable proof then that they're working towards what they say they want to work towards. And that brings them confidence, right? And that kind of confidence within the team, the moment's never too big. And so they show poise in moments of adversity. They expect to fail. They welcome failure because they know it's necessary for growth. So I love a little bit of those nuggets that you sprinkled in there about how to really foster this culture of accountability in the workplace and have a really, really growth mindset, startup feel type of culture.
I think it's got to be, if I can just expound upon that one with one comment, Ryan, and that is, if you don't embrace failure, if there's a fear of failure in the organization, you're going to fail. One of the books that we read in book club was called Black Box Thinking, which kind of parallels the two different traits of the medical industry and the airline industry. When a plane crashes or has an incident, there's the black box, and they go get all the relevant data and they dissect it, like what happened, not only what happened and why and how can we fix it, but they want to disseminate that. It's not just if Delta Airlines has an accident, they want to kind of hoard it and not tell anyone. They want to say, hey, FAA says everyone needs to know about this to protect everyone in the future. Do you know that, like, in the hospital industry, the number of accidents that could have been or should have been avoided, like accidental surgeries or accidental mishaps or things that could have been avoided, are like number 2 of deaths inside hospitals. It's a really high, staggering number every year of avoidable mishaps in a hospital. Someone given the wrong drugs, cutting off the wrong, leg. I mean, all these things happen. And when the medical industry just tries to sweep it under the rug and not talk about it and lawyer up to make sure that they don't get hammered, it's the exact opposite in the airline industry. So it was interesting. And then talking about how we can incorporate that into our culture. And so, we have our morning huddle, and we're trying to now incorporate that in where we embrace, hey, I failed and this is how I failed. Just want everyone to know it. And we're starting to get, it's tough because there's a lot of judgment that comes out, but we're starting off with some discussions about failure, and it's becoming really therapeutic in the organization to hear, starting at the top, how I failed and how others have failed and how people are, missing on different items. And, the more you can talk about your failures, the higher likelihood you're going to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. I think definitely easy to say, really hard to instill in your culture to have that positive view and frame towards failure. Because what are we taught in school, right? Failing's bad. So I think it does take, for those of you listening, this is an endless pursuit, I think, really, no doubt, where it takes years and years to really positive affirmation with your team to really ingrain this and have that transparency that it's not only okay to fail, but it's encouraged, because then everybody else on the team can learn lessons and we don't have to repeat them. I am going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Speaking of collective genius, what has been the most impactful presentation that you've witnessed thus far?
Wow. And you're putting me on record too.
That hasn't been your own.
Probably Jeff Hoffman's presentation on the 10 keys to entrepreneurial success. Just an inspirational guy and someone I was blessed to spend a little bit of time with. Had a massive impact on me and how I want to kind of move forward. The other one that had a big impact on me just because I hired him as a coach was Daniel Marcos. I find him to be extremely approachable and very down to earth, almost frumpy in his in the way that he addresses, just kind of like a, oh shucks guy. But the depth of his knowledge for business is just unbelievable. And so hired him as a CEO coach, and he really helped me level up. And, I mean, it's constant pursuit, as you mentioned earlier. Failing is all that we do in business. But, I feel like I've grown in my ability by leaning on his wisdom. So those two are probably two very influential guys, that I found through the group.
Yeah. I love to hear that. And if you're listening to this, here's Mark, somebody that is CEO, owner, founder of a really big company, big in terms of wholesaling and what we do and direct to seller and stuff. But this is a guy that's still looking to invest in himself and seeking out what kind of mentorship and what coaches, what can I do to level myself up as a leader and my skill set. Has that always been a part of your being, Mark? Is that just kind of how you were raised, or do you think that there's been some lessons along the way that made you think that was imperative?
I think athletes are inherently okay with getting coaches and understanding that even if you could beat your coach at tennis doesn't make them less of a coach. They don't have to be better than you or even know your business. I struggled as a bit of a hothead back in the day on the tennis court. So my dad did spend some of his hard-earned money on my psychological training. So I went to a sports psychologist back in New Zealand to try and help me overcome some of the hurdles I was having with being just too hard on myself. So yeah, I think I've always seen that. And then look, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most. And the benefit of being in a group like Collective Genius is that you just are surrounded by just winners. And, I think that the people that I surround myself with now, when I see those guys getting coaching or, looking to level up or get assistance or ask my opinion if they're in a bind, those are the things that you always, the more you see and learn from those that are in a place of doing bigger things than you are, and you see them doing, small tasks very, very well. I think Brewer's another guy that I look up to. He's very humble despite his success, and he's always willing to do the small things, which I think is a really cool character trait of his. He's not afraid to dig in and, really nerd out on a different person's perspective on sales training, even though he's probably one of the best sales trainers, right?
Yeah.
Hanging around guys like that, it's infectious and it's great to, be able to call him a friend and spend time talking about leadership and what makes him tick and how, we can all get better together. Jason Medley is another phenomenal example, a very dear friend of mine and someone I've come to know very, very well. And I'm always, like, I was just talking to him yesterday and was just talking about, some troubles that my son was having, just in a decision that he was about to make. And just the wisdom that comes from years of, looking at other people make tough decisions. Jason had some words of wisdom that I was able to take back and share with my son. So, yeah, look, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. And if you want to level up, get in a different room.
Yeah, that is great advice. It's all the intangibles. I can definitely say being a part of a mastermind like Collective Genius has been life-changing for me. And every single time that I go afterwards, I feel like I can really do anything, and not out of ego or not out of, arrogance, just out of a sense of calm and like a sense of clarity. So I absolutely resonate with that. It's about being around a community that fills up your bucket, right? And brings you energy. I did want to end here, Mark, with a couple questions for you, specifically about your turnkey operation, because we have a lot of listeners. Our market is in Boise, and I'm getting a lot of people that reach out. They ask, hey, where can I deploy some cash that is in some place that's maybe a little bit more cash flow friendly, but also has some appreciation upside too. It's difficult to find top operators that you really know and trust that are going to take care of your money and buy what you want and perform. Could you talk a little bit about your turnkey business and how you guys work with clients?
Sure. As I briefly mentioned earlier, we have kind of transitioned into new construction. The perfect turnkey client for us is kind of a high income, high net worth individual that wants to get into real estate, but in the same way that they value the mentorship that a good financial advisor would bring to them as far as allocating their money in the stock market, we try to do something similar in allocating their money accurately into good quality real estate investments. So that being said, we have had no problem in leveling up our asset class and still selling through. So rather than if someone's just wanting $150,000, single family rental, we actually don't even do that anymore. But we are selling duplexes and fourplexes in the $500,000 and $800,000 range. Still getting Fannie Mae conforming financing on them too, which is really cool, Ryan. So what our niche has been is go build brand new duplexes and fourplexes in A and B areas, depending on the asset, and then getting them rented out and retaining that management, and then selling them to an investor base that says, hey, Mark, I want to invest in real estate, but I don't want to deal with the hassle of it. So if there was someone out there that had, 150 to 200 grand to deploy into, an asset that they wanted to have brand new construction, that cash flow positive in a high appreciation market like Kansas City, which is just going from strength to strength, and not have to worry about the property management, then they should definitely look us up. That's something that we can deliver to them. So thanks for that opportunity to plug.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a sector of your business that we haven't even talked about yet, but the property management side and how expert you guys are in operations, managing over 700 properties. Has that always been the case, or?
Oh boy, did you want to spend another hour talking about property management?
I think it's important for the listeners, right, to get a feel. Everybody knows a property manager, right? But when you do it at scale, and especially when you incorporate it in with these new assets, you really have to have your stuff dialed in.
No doubt. And I would even argue to say that you should not be investing in real estate if you don't have a dialed in property management team on your side. So no, operations is everything when it comes to PM. Vacancy and maintenance are the two big killers of cash flow, and that's directly related to how well the property is managed. So we take great pride in having best-in-class property management. It's one of our pillars. And so, that being said, we have a team of about 21, 22 people that serve on that side of the business that are managing these doors. And they do a phenomenal job for our clientele and looking to scale that up in 2025. Actually, up until now, we've only managed our own assets, meaning we had to buy it, rehab it, or build it for us to manage it. And now we've flipped the script. We're actually in 2025 going to open up and start managing for people that have a portfolio. We're not just going to do onesie twosies because, again, our avatar is a high income, high net worth individual that wants to invest for the long term in real estate. But we will take on some of these additional, do some third party management for people as well, just because we're getting really good at it. And we have like a 98% retention rate on our clientele, but property managers across the board are like 50% retention. I mean, it's just, it's shocking how much people, you mentioned earlier, everyone knows a property manager, but nobody loves their property manager. So we're pretty proud of the fact that our investors really do appreciate how hard we work for them and what we do.
I love the marriage of property management and new assets, especially given kind of that time horizon to be able to pre-lease and the scalability of that as well. If it's similar unit type and everything, and you can really achieve a high level of efficiency when you marry those things, and then you get a really happy owner on the backside and a happy tenant, a high quality tenant, because everything's brand new. There's not a ton of maintenance. I love that model. What markets are you guys currently doing that in? Is it just Kansas City or?
Yeah, just Kansas City. There's 3 or 4 different cities within the greater KC metro that we're offering that new construction rental in. So yeah, we're focusing, keeping it close to home here.
Love it. Okay. What did you want to say? Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying our website actually just has so much information on that, sbdhousing.com. And so at sbdhousing.com, they can go and look at all of our different multifamily new construction and, look at some of the properties. It's pretty special product what they're pumping out. It's great stuff.
Incredible. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Mark. I really appreciate all the wisdom that you've imparted on this podcast. I know I've learned a lot, especially over the years knowing you. Still working on my golf game, but that might never get up to snuff. We'll see. Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
No, look, enjoyed my time with you. Thank you so much. I'm always open to questions. Hit me up on the socials if people have questions more, but enjoyed spending time with you. Love it.
What are the best ways for people to reach out to you?
Probably on Insta at Marck De Lautour or on the book. But yeah, the team tries to keep things updated there as best we can to see what's going on. We've got some new construction stuff coming out now that we're trying to fill the social feeds with. But it's fun times. We've got a good team here.
Incredible. All right, guys. Well, if you have some money to place, maybe you know somebody that's looking for a high level asset, a high level team, Mark's your guy. You can marry the best of both worlds with cash flow and appreciation. I can't recommend Mark highly enough. So, Mark, appreciate your time today, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.